The stars above Sector E9 had always been quiet. Patrol ships moved in routine patterns, scanning for pirates or smugglers, but nothing ever happened out there. It was a dead zone, no colonies, no major trade routes, just space. That was why Officer Lorek was half asleep in his seat when the sensor alarm beeped once. He blinked, leaned forward, and stared at the display. Something massive had just appeared out of nowhere. No warp signal, no energy buildup, no flashes, just silence and then presence. The computer struggled to classify it. Unidentified object 30 kilometers in length, it said with a confused tone. Lurek's partner, a younger cadet named Vian, stared at the view screen. "That's not a ship," he whispered. But it was. A ship unlike anything they had ever seen, blacker than space itself, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. No markings, no windows, no movement. It floated silently like a shadow against the stars. They tried to scan it, but the sensors failed. They tried to send a signal, but no response came. Then, without warning, every system on their ship shut down. Lights died. Engines stopped. Even their communication with command went silent. And before they could react, their entire ship vanished from every sensor across the Empire. Across the galaxy, in the heart of the Galactic Empire, High Command received the last log from Patrol Unit 7. Confusion turned to concern when they saw the data, something that large should have been impossible to miss. And yet it had appeared instantly and disappeared just as quickly. Admiral Threx, a seasoned war leader who had seen every kind of ship and strategy, stared at the recordings in silence. It didn't make sense. The patrol ship had sent a partial scan, just a few seconds of data before being wiped out. But those few seconds showed something terrifying. The unknown ship had no heat signature. It emitted no sound. It didn't seem to run on any known fuel or technology. Even the background radiation around it dropped. It was like space itself refused to acknowledge the thing. Threx ordered immediate lockdown of all data and assembled a task force. He didn't want panic. Not yet. But he knew this wasn't a pirate. This wasn't a rogue fleet. This was something entirely new. Rumors began to spread in the lower ranks. Soldiers whispered about ghost ships, old legends from forgotten colonies about human vessels lost in deep space, returning with strange powers. Some said it was a test from the Emperor himself. Others believed it was a weapon from an ancient enemy. But none of those stories made sense. Because the object wasn't doing anything, it wasn't attacking, it wasn't claiming territory, it wasn't broadcasting demands. It was just there, watching. The Empire sent drones, but none returned. They sent a scout ship with elite pilots. It disappeared within seconds of approaching the object. There were no explosions, no wreckage, just silence. The Empire tried to ignore it, but every time they looked away, another patrol vanished. Within a few days, the situation grew worse. A civilian cargo ship flying through a neighboring sector reported seeing the same object still unmoving, still silent. But this time, the ship didn't vanish. Instead, all its lights and systems shut off for exactly 1 minute. Then everything came back online, perfectly fine. The crew was unharmed, but shaken. Every screen on their ship had displayed the same strange message: observation complete. When the Empire got hold of the footage, panic finally reached the surface. The ship was not just appearing. It was choosing, studying. It could destroy, but it didn't. It could control systems instantly without any physical contact. And yet, it said nothing, did nothing else. It just floated away and vanished again. Back at Imperial Command, Threx gathered the highest-ranking officers. He showed them the scans, the message, and the silence. Then he opened a restricted file. Most of them had never even heard of it. The file dated back 300 years to the early days of the Empire. It was a forgotten mission to a distant blue planet called Earth. The Empire had marked it as primitive, unworthy of attention. A small group of humans had launched a final colony ship after a brief encounter with an Imperial probe. Then silence. No one had thought of Earth since. But the last recorded message from that human ship was chilling. "We are not your prey. We are your warning." And then the ship had vanished from records, as if someone had erased its path on purpose. Threx didn't believe in ghosts, but something deep inside him turned cold. If this phantom ship was human, if it had been hiding for centuries, evolving, watching, then the Empire had made a terrible mistake. They had ignored something they never truly understood. He stood up and looked at the map of the galaxy. That one unknown ship had done more damage to Imperial control than entire rebellions. Without firing a shot, it had created fear in the hearts of commanders, chaos in strategy, and silence across systems. And that was with just one appearance. What if there were more? What if this was just the beginning? Ships were rerouted. Border sectors were closed. A full fleet was placed on alert, but no one wanted to go near that sector. Even the bravest captains gave excuses. Systems not responding. Fuel needs inspection. Crew not ready. The Empire, which had ruled the stars for centuries with strength and fear, now whispered behind closed doors about something they didn't understand. Something that might not even want war but had the power to end it without lifting a hand. As the days passed, the Phantom ship was seen one more time drifting slowly through the edges of another system, just passing by. It didn't stop. It didn't interfere. It simply moved on. But every Imperial ship in that sector retreated immediately. The fear was no longer about what the ship would do. It was about not knowing what it wanted. That kind of silence was louder than war drums. Admiral Threx stood in the center of the Imperial Archive's hidden chamber, a place few even knew existed, a place where failed missions, forbidden discoveries, and erased records were kept under layers of encryption and political silence. He had broken 12 codes just to get inside, bypassing alarms meant to protect the very lies the Empire had built its legacy upon. The Phantom ship's sudden arrival had forced him into action, into a place where history was not told in glory, but in warnings buried beneath digital dust. As the dim lights flickered over ancient consoles, he loaded a backup file tagged EX19HUMANCONTACT. The screen pulsed, showing distorted images of a forgotten planet, green fields, blue oceans, cities once full of life. The logs described early Imperial contact with humans as uneventful. The scouts had found Earth centuries ago, a planet still using primitive machines, yet strangely united under one goal: escape. Earth had been dying, not from war or disease, but from quiet decay. Its people, desperate, had pooled their final resources into a single Project Horizon, a deep spaceship not built to survive, but to evolve. They had no weapons, no shields, no war fleets. What they had was something far more dangerous, a plan built on time, silence, and patience. The Empire, in its arrogance, had dismissed them. The humans were left alone, the planet tagged as unimportant. But one log caught Threx's eye, a report by an officer named Kyle Vose, who had visited Earth during its final days. His entry was brief, his tone uneasy. "They don't act like a dying species," he had written. "They act like something is coming." Vose described how the humans spoke of destiny, of returning stronger, of becoming something the galaxy would never forget. He spoke of strange machines being launched into deep space, not for war, but for understanding. They had mapped the stars, not for conquest, but for survival. Their last message, captured by a hidden probe, echoed in Threx's mind like a ghost. "We are the question that will reshape your answers." After that, all traces of Project Horizon were erased. Someone in the Empire had buried it so deeply that even the emperors who followed never learned the full truth. Until now. Threx felt a chill run down his spine. The Phantom ship wasn't some random threat. It was the return of a species the Empire had underestimated. A species that had vanished without leaving a trail, only to reappear with impossible technology and silent power. How had they done it? How had humans crossed centuries, disappeared from records, and come back with a ship that defied physics itself? He searched the archive for anything else, any clue. And then he found it, an old, forgotten signal recorded by a deep space beacon 50 years ago. It was short, almost meaningless at first. But when decrypted, it revealed coordinates. Not in any charted system. A blank zone between sectors, ignored for generations. Threx knew instantly that whatever answers still existed, they were out there. He ordered a stealth scout ship to be prepared, one with no official markings and no traceable flight path. He would lead the mission himself. As his ship, the Sable Light, left the command station in secret, Threx reviewed every piece of data again. The silence of the phantom ship, the message observation complete, the humans' warning from long ago, it all pointed to something far deeper than a simple military threat. This was no war declaration. It was an ancient test, and the Empire had already started failing. As they approached the unmarked coordinates, strange interference began affecting their systems. Not disabling, but altering. Screens flickered, time sensors jumped by seconds, and for a brief moment, every crew member felt as if they were being watched from inside their own minds. Then the interference stopped. In the distance, hidden in the shadow of a collapsed star, they saw a massive, broken structure floating in space. It looked like the remains of a station or a research vessel. No heat, no life. But something about it pulsed with hidden energy. Threx docked the ship and led a team aboard. Inside, the halls were covered in strange symbols, some human, some not. There were empty rooms filled with devices they couldn't identify, machines that looked like they had built themselves, and records that refused to be read by any Imperial system. But one chamber was still active, and inside it was a beacon still blinking. They activated it. A hologram appeared, an old human scientist speaking in calm, measured words. "If you have found this," she said, "then we are ready." We did not disappear. We advanced. We adapted. You feared us because you could not control us. Now, you will understand why that fear was justified. The hologram shifted, showing a timeline of human evolution, not biological, but mental, technological, even philosophical. They had gone beyond simple survival. They had found ways to think faster, live longer, and communicate without speaking. They had learned not to build stronger weapons, but to build themselves. The final message froze the room. The Empire seeks to rule by fear. We do not seek to rule. We seek to change. What you fear is not our power. What you fear is your own weakness reflected in our silence. The recording ended, and the chamber went dark. Threx stood there, surrounded by officers who no longer looked proud or powerful. They looked small. He understood now that the phantom ship was not just a test of strength, it was a mirror. A reminder. Humans had left the galaxy weak, dying, and ignored. They had returned to something no empire could predict. And the scariest part wasn't what they would do next. It was that no one knew if they were even angry. They had power, but not hate. They had technology, but no demands. They simply observed. And that was what made them truly terrifying. Back aboard the Sable Light, Threx recorded his private log. "They buried the truth," he said. "They hid what humans were capable of. We thought we had seen every type of enemy. But what we face now is not an enemy. It's something else. Something we cannot name yet. They are not returning to conquer. They are returning to witness what we have become. And I fear their judgment will not be kind." As the ship turned back toward Imperial space, the stars outside seemed colder. The silence deeper. And Threx knew the Empire had awakened something ancient, not from outside the galaxy, but from deep within its forgotten past. A past that would soon become its future. The Imperial Palace was silent as the Emergency Council gathered in the heart of the throne chamber, hidden from public eyes behind walls that had heard centuries of secrets. The Emperor, a man known for never showing fear, sat unusually still as he listened to Admiral Threx's full report. No one interrupted because the words spoken were not just unusual, they were impossible. A ship appearing from nowhere, human technology defying science, a silent observer watching from the edge of space, and a forgotten past rising like a shadow from the grave. The council murmured among themselves, unsure whether to believe or panic, until the chamber lights flickered once, then twice, and then died. For a moment, The entire palace plunged into darkness, the kind that felt alive, heavy, almost breathing. And then, without warning, every holoscreen lit up across the throne room, not with code or data, but with a face. A human face. It wasn't real time. It was a message, recorded and sent, but the clarity of it made it feel like the person was speaking directly to them, as if they stood in the room unseen. The human in the message was old, but not weak. His eyes were sharp, filled with intelligence that cut deeper than any blade. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't smile. He simply began with a voice so calm it made the silence around it feel loud. "We do not return as conquerors," he said. "We do not come with flags, armies, or threats. We come with knowledge. And with a question, what did you do with the galaxy after we left?" The message paused, but before anyone could speak, it continued as if predicting interruption. "We watched as you expanded, enslaved, and rewrote history. We watched as you silenced planets and turned wonder into fear. But we were not idle. We did not vanish. We evolved." The council sat frozen as the image changed to show star systems blinking in and out, as if being cataloged in real time, with data flowing so fast even the Empire's advanced systems struggled to keep up. The message wasn't just words, it was a display of power. Power that didn't scream. It whispered. And it whispered with the voice of inevitability. As the message played, the Emperor's chief communication officer reported something that made every heart in the room skip. The signal carrying the message had not come from a ship. It hadn't come from any known transmission source. It had come from the very edge of deep space, where sensors failed and time itself was strange. The signal had formed out of nothing, pure vacuum. The void had spoken. The Emperor ordered a trace, but the systems failed to register any source. It was as if the message had been written directly into reality, bypassing all known laws. The human continued, his voice now carrying a faint weight, not anger, but disappointment. "You thought our silence was weakness. You mistook patience for surrender. But silence is a language. And in our silence, we learned everything. We learned about you." A new visual appeared behind him, showing Imperial fleets, key officers, battle tactics, hidden bases, classified knowledge, displayed with chilling ease. They'd been watching longer than anyone imagined. Admiral Threx exchanged a glance with the Emperor, both understanding something without speaking it aloud. This was not a declaration of war. It was something worse. It was a reminder that war would be pointless. That humans, if they chose to strike, wouldn't need a fleet. Just a decision. The message ended with one final sentence that rang in the air like a quiet thunder. "We are not your enemies. But if you make us one, we will be the last." The screens went black, and the silence returned, but now it felt different, heavier, like something invisible had taken a seat at the table. The Emperor stood, not with pride, but with caution. For the first time in his reign, he addressed the council not with orders, but with a question. "What do we do when the past outgrows the present?" No one answered, because there was no easy answer. The Empire had always faced its problems with force, with weapons, and fear. But now they faced something that had no fear to exploit, no enemy to intimidate. They faced a species that had learned to wait and grow, not in secret. That silence had now ended. In the hours that followed, the Empire sent diplomatic signals across space, hoping to find a way to contact the humans. But nothing came back. No replies. No acknowledgments. The phantom ship remained in its position, doing nothing, saying nothing, simply existing. That was its power. The fear it brought was not through action, but through inaction. Every Empire ship that approached it suffered strange malfunctions, power dips, altered gravity readings, crew members experiencing dreams they couldn't explain. The closer they got, the more reality twisted, until finally, the Emperor ordered all vessels to stay away. It was no longer a military operation. It was something else, something they did not understand. Whispers began spreading through the military ranks, through the noble houses, through the outer colonies. Some believed the humans had become gods. Others believed they had become monsters. but no one believed they were ordinary anymore. On a distant mining colony, a young engineer found a hidden file buried deep within the station's archive. It was an old human song, accidentally transmitted centuries ago during the early days of Project Horizon. The song was about stars, hope, and finding a new home. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't dark. It was beautiful. She played it again and again, realizing something that no general or emperor had said aloud the humans hadn't come back to destroy. They had come back to see if the galaxy was worth saving. And if not, they would simply leave again. Or worse, they would erase the mistake. She sent the song to Central Command, hoping someone would understand the message behind the melody. That maybe the answer was not in more fleets or stronger weapons, but in remembering what had been forgotten that once. The humans were dreamers. And if those dreams had survived in silence, they must now be louder than any war.as days turned into weeks. The Phantom ship remained motionless in deep space, an unblinking eye staring back at the galaxy, never responding, never attacking, never leaving. Its presence was like a whisper in every imperial conversation, a shadow that stretched from the highest councils to the smallest frontier outposts. Yet it was not the ship itself that caused panic, it was the silence that came with it, and the message that had played only once but echoed endlessly in every mind. The Emperor had begun gathering secret intelligence from every corner of the Empire, ordering scholars, historians, and ancient AI archives to search for anything related to old human history. What they discovered was not just shocking, it was terrifying. Humanity had not just vanished. They had hidden themselves on purpose. Thousands of years ago, after a war that nearly shattered their own civilization, they had stepped away from the galactic stage and vanished into the dark, cutting off all contact, erasing their coordinates, even wiping their traces from other systems. But what disturbed the Council the most was the reason they had seen something coming, something bigger than war, something that only they had understood. And in their final act, before disappearing, they had encoded their warning in a quantum file that no one in the Empire had ever managed to decode until now. The Imperial cryptographers finally broke the human encryption by accident, through a chain reaction caused by the same signal that delivered the mysterious message. The moment the file opened, it unleashed not just data, but a living history, a holographic stream of humanity's journey from Earth, from the fragile blue planet to the edge of the galaxy. And as it played, the truth was revealed in full. Humans had once been weak, divided, emotional creatures, but through war, loss, and endless struggle, they had evolved beyond physical boundaries. They had discovered not only advanced technology, but a way to manipulate space and time without machines. Their minds had grown, not in power, but in perception. They saw the universe not as something to conquer, but something to survive. And most disturbingly, they had seen the Empire long before the Empire even knew what it would become. They had predicted its rise, its thirst for control, its method of erasing species, rewriting truths, and pretending to be the center of everything. The message revealed one word humans had used for the Empire even before contact was made. That word hit harder than any weapon. It meant the humans had been waiting all along, not just for survival, but for judgment. Inside the palace, the Emperor sat alone in his private chamber, watching the final moments of the holographic stream. The image of Earth, now evolved into something unrecognizable, floated before him. What shocked him most was not the technology or the revelations, but the expression on the human faces in the recording. They did not look like soldiers. They looked like mourners, as if they were not returning to punish, but to grieve, to mourn what the galaxy had become in their absence. Outside, across the galaxy, strange changes began. Ancient satellites on abandoned planets suddenly powered on. Forgotten probes from humanity's past began broadcasting again, carrying the same haunting song that had first been found on the mining colony, a melody filled with hope, loss, and a longing to come home. People began to wonder if the Phantom ship was not here for war, but for remembrance. That perhaps it had come not to fight, but to ask a single question: had the galaxy learned anything without them? Still, fear ruled the Empire, and fear led to desperate acts. A rogue general, ignoring direct Orders launched a stealth attack on the Phantom ship, believing that a well-placed strike could disable or destroy it before it became a greater threat. The attack never made contact. The moment the stealth ships approached the vessel, they disappeared. Not exploded. Not damaged. Just gone. No explosion, no trace, no signal. One by one, every ship that tried to reach the Phantom vanished, as if space itself had chosen to protect the human vessel. The general was arrested, but it was too late. The humans responded not with violence, but with another message. This one was short, but more unsettling than the last. Do not repeat your mistakes. We do not punish. We correct. And then the stars shifted. Not literally, but maps across every star system updated simultaneously, as if someone had just rewritten reality. The Phantom ship had moved, but no one had seen it move. It had crossed light years in an instant, reappearing near the Empire's largest military base, watching again. Waiting, panic turned into chaos behind closed doors. Religious leaders called it divine intervention. Scientists called it a dimensional anomaly. But everyone called it human. That single word now carried a new meaning, not weak, not emotional, not primitive, but unknowable, unstoppable, unpredictable. The Empire began to fracture from within, not from rebellion, but from doubt. How could they fight something that didn't attack? How could they prepare for a war that might never happen? The Emperor finally addressed his people, choosing to break silence with a message of his own. But as he spoke, something strange happened. Every screen across the Empire split his image in two, one half showing him, and the other half showing the old human from the first message. They spoke at the same time. Different words. But one message: it is time to speak honestly. Or not at all. After that, the Phantom ship powered down its lights. But it remained. Waiting. Always waiting. Not for battle, but for truth. The stars had always been silent observers, cold and distant, watching empires rise and fall without emotion. But on that day, something in them changed and everyone across the galaxy could feel it. Space itself felt different, heavier, like the weight of history had suddenly returned, pressing down on every ship, every station, every mind. The Phantom ship, still floating without motion, now orbited the Empire's central world without any resistance, as if daring the most powerful fleet in the galaxy to fire first. But no one did. No orders were given. No weapons charged. The fear of what might happen next was too strong, and the message humans had sent echoed in every mind. We do not punish. We correct. Now, the stars were filled with whispers, strange signals, ancient voices, coordinates from long-dead systems blinking to life. The Empire's long-held maps, carefully built over centuries of conquest, began to change without warning. Names were rewritten. Borders collapsed. Planets that had vanished from memory were suddenly found again, and ruins once thought lifeless now shined with unfamiliar energy. The stars, it seemed, were no longer loyal to the Empire. They were responding to something older, something hidden, something human. In hidden chambers of power, the Imperial Council debated in fear and confusion. The Emperor, once feared across the stars, now sat in silence, his eyes fixed on the stars outside the throne room, as if expecting them to speak. And in a way, they did. One by one, every Imperial archive began to shut down, replaced by a single glowing phrase in every known language: "You have forgotten the truth." We have not. This was no attack. It was a correction of the past. The Phantom ship wasn't destroying the Empire's technology. It was rewriting it, returning history that had been erased, voices that had been silenced, facts that had been twisted to feed the Empire's pride. Schools began to receive different lessons. Children asked questions no one had ever prepared them for. Soldiers dreamed of Earth, though they had never seen it. Something deep in the galaxy had shifted, not with violence, but with memory. And with memory came change. Then, without warning, a second ship appeared. Not from hyperspace. Not through a wormhole. It simply was. One moment space was empty and then it wasn't. This one was smaller, silver, shaped like a drop of light, pulsing with gentle blue energy. It hovered beside the phantom ship like a younger sibling, calm and still. Across the Empire, panic threatened to break loose again, but nothing happened. Not yet. Scientists scanned the new vessel and found it to be made of materials they didn't recognize, with no weapons, no heat signatures, no control surfaces. It was like a dream that had become real. And then, across every screen, every station, every planet, the same image appeared, stars rearranging themselves into a new pattern, forming a map that none could recognize. The message that followed was the final blow to the Empire's pride. This is not your galaxy. You are only visitors. The stars, remember. The stars decide. And then, as if on cue, the stars themselves shifted. Not just from the perspective of one planet, but across the galaxy, constellations bent and twisted, light stretched and bent, as though the entire galaxy was alive, responding to a new rhythm, a rhythm not of machines, but of memory. In that moment, the people of the Empire began to feel something they had long forgotten: humility. For centuries, they had ruled, expanded, rewritten history, believing themselves to be the only truth, the peak of evolution, the center of everything. But now they saw how small they truly were. How blind. How foolish. The humans had not come to destroy them. They had come to remind them. And that reminder was far more powerful than any weapon. The Emperor, now no longer speaking from a position of strength, gave a final broadcast, not to command, but to confess. He admitted that they had feared the unknown, that they had rewritten the past to protect their pride, and that in doing so, they had become blind to the truth. He bowed his head and spoke the last words of the Empire's age of control. We thought we were the fire, but we were only the smoke. After that, the phantom ship moved again, no engines, no thrust, just a slow, graceful shift toward the edge of known space. The smaller vessel followed, and together they vanished, not into hyperspace, but into silence. As if they had never been there at all. But the change remained. Across the galaxy, new alliances formed. Species that had once feared the Empire now began to rebuild, guided by the messages humans had left behind. Ancient technology awakened. New truths were discovered. And most importantly, people began to listen to the stars. Not as masters, but as students. Humanity did not return to rule. They returned to remind the galaxy of what it had forgotten. That truth cannot be silenced. That the stars do not belong to one race. That sometimes silence is the loudest warning of all. And somewhere, in the dark space beyond the maps, the phantom ship waits again, not as a threat, but as a promise. That if the galaxy ever forgets again, they will return. And when they do, the stars will change once more.